Okay, welcome back, baking and pastry students. It's Monday. We are right now, as you can see by the screen, we are in week 10. We are 50% of the way through the semester. Okay, because we have Wednesday off. Because we have Wednesday off this week, we're gonna hit the ground running. We have to do some mise en place work today, okay, in order to set ourselves up to have enough time for you to frost your cupcakes and be able to eat them on Thursday and or Friday, okay? So we are doing a cake baking lab this week. Let's jump right in. As you can see, I make mention of grading. So grades are up to date in Google Classroom as of this morning. They're up to date in Skyward as of this morning. I went ahead and did it by 9 p.m. or 9 a.m. so that it would influence your Tiger Time grade poll. Now, the one thing is, I understood that the grade poll might have happened at 8 a.m. instead of 9, which is sort of the agreed upon time. If that happened, then I didn't get it in time. I was trying to rush to get it in by 9, just because if your grade went up to passing, I wanted you to be rewarded with being able to be flexed for my class, okay? So now, depending on how you are in your other classes, that might influence whether you remain to be flexed. But if you have a D or F, you're going to be focused, as a reminder, and that grade poll happened this morning, and that covers the next 3 weeks for Tiger Time, right? So just a reminder on that. So again, grades are up to date in Google Classroom and Skyward, so you want to check those if you're unsure of where you're standing as in my class. And then as well, if you have not been Chef of the Week yet, I want to urge you to be on the Chef of the Week for this week, just to ensure that you get that completed and get that grade adjusted. Because right now in the grade book, that has a goose egg in it. That is a 0 that we want to get taken care of. Okay. So jumping on into our lab, our learning target for this week is I and we will learn and apply basic cake baking and decorating skills. So I'd like you to go ahead and period 3, you're going to go ahead and write that on as the learning target. I and we will learn and apply basic cake baking and decorating skills. And I'm going to go ahead and proceed. So just grab a picture of it really quick. All right, with the Chromebook, take a picture of it if you need it. And then I'm going to proceed with lecture. I'll put this back up momentarily, okay? So again, we're doing cakes. We're in week 10. All right, all the resources are in Google Classroom. And then we have 1 unit to do in Ruby. Unit number 8 is what we're completing in Ruby. All right. So just to draw your attention to the fact that I'll give you a little bit of time today as well for Unit 8. Okay, if time allows. I'm going to continue on with lecture. Let me, if you need, really quickly, I'll put it up. I and we will learn and apply basic cake baking and decorating skills. Okay, that's what we're putting on for our learning target. Thanks for that. Basic cake baking and decorating skills. So, cake, right, is a form of a sweet made with flour, sugar, and other ingredients. Typically, it's standard is baking it, but there's other techniques of application globally that you can look at. We won't get into that. And really, this is just a fundamental preparation. We do cupcakes in this class instead of full-size cakes, just because the bake time is less. So it's just like doing a full-size cake, just in a miniaturized version. Okay. In their oldest form, cakes were modifications of bread. Okay. Then they started to introduce sugar into the preparation as sugar started to move globally, and obviously there was affiliation with slave trade and a lot of negative things that happened globally back then. But sugar started to be used in the tea in the UK, which influenced it to be used in the patisserie area, the pastry area, and that's where cakes really started to emerge. If you look back in the chef named Carême and Escoffier, you started to find more sweet desserts to take place at the end of the meal in the late 1800s and forward, just because of the distribution of sugar amongst trade globally. Obviously, as I said earlier, they vary in sizes vertically, right? Layered cakes, they vary in size like sheet cakes you can buy at Costco for a birthday. They vary in size. In this case, we're going to do cupcakes just simply because they're smaller in size. That'll help us manage our cook time this week. Okay? Varying, obviously, in flavors as well. You can see some examples here. Here's a strawberry chiffon cake on the left here. It's got strawberries inlaid in the center of it, so sort of a Bavarian mousse in the center. And then when you slice into the cake, you can see the vertical cut of the strawberry, which is a nice appealing presentation. Here's a German chocolate cake in the center, okay? It's got chocolate, coconut, cocoa, often maraschino cherries as a standard garnish on top. And then you get into more modern, right, types of finishes, okay? And so you see an example here of Thanksgiving turkeys made with different types of chocolate. You can see a Reese's Pieces sort of turned on its side as the body of the turkey. Okay, pretty fun stuff. Okay, so what I want to do is just give you a little video that's going to give you an overview of some of the tips and tricks of how to keep the cake from sticking and the preparation process. So watch the closest screen, please.
Hi guys, it's Sab. In this quick tutorial, I'm going to show you guys how to make the perfect sponge cake. I get a lot of inquiries about this cake. This is one of my absolute favorite recipes. If you can master this recipe, it is really delicious. I'm going to show you guys really great tips, how to get it out of the pan, what types of pan to use, and all that jazz. So keep watching and I'm going to show you guys my tips and tricks on how to make the perfect sponge cake. Tip number 1, when to stop whipping your egg whites. Stop whipping if you can tip your bowl completely to the side and none of your egg whites move. It's nice and stiff and it stays put. Tip number 2, use a pan with a removable bottom. Using this type of pan or like a cheesecake pan will be easier to remove your cake because you can just literally take your hand in the bottom and push your cake up out of the pan and it's nice and smooth and perfect every time. And I recommend the cake pan by Fat Daddy-O's. Tip number 3, don't scrape the bowl. Okay, so I know you're thinking you just mixed your batter, you're pouring it nicely into your ungreased cheesecake pans, and you want to scrape the bowl. Wrong. Do not scrape your bowl. If you do that, what'll happen is you'll end up with pieces of egg yolk that hasn't been mixed in properly, so it'll sink to the very bottom, and then you'll end up with hard pieces of egg yolk throughout your cake, or more like to the bottom because it sinks to the bottom, and it doesn't bake off very well. So just let gravity do its thing, tip the bowl upside down, and get what you can out just by tapping the mixing bowl. Tip number 4, how to remove the cake from the pan. So first I took the cakes out and I'm inverting it upside down, letting it cool down completely. And now that it's cooled down, I am going to take a plastic knife. You want to use plastic because you don't want to scrape your cake pans, and just go right around the edges softly and gently. And then once you go around the edges completely, all you gotta do is take your hand right underneath the cake pan and just slip it through, and it is just a piece of cake and it comes out perfectly every time. And just the same steps as before, take your plastic knife and just run it right along the bottom to remove it from the bottom portion. And I'm using a cake lifter, but if you don't have that, you can use anything flat like a spatula to remove the cake from the bottom.
Hooper?
And here are just some extra tips. You could take a cake pan, flip it upside down if you don't have a turntable, and use it like one. Place your cake on top and just begin to frost it that way. But first, I will show you how to create the layers. I have a Wilton cake leveler here. The blade is really dull, so you have to do a two-step process. You want to make your initial kind of marking using the Wilton leveler, put it aside, and then take a sharp knife and make a deeper cut. And then you want to bring the leveler back, and now you can go completely through the cake. If you don't do a two-step process for the cake, you probably will have a hard time using this leveler because, again, the blade is really dull. So doing it this way, this actually works better. Then just grab your trusty cake board and get your cake lifter or spatula, whatever you're using, and just gently lift up. And here are your 2 layers. Just repeat with the other cake. Now I'm going to show you guys how to keep your cakes put. So I have a cake turntable here. Earlier I showed you how to turn a cake pan into your own little turntable. So now I'm going to add some pieces of Scotch tape to the bottom of my cake board. And you want to do this is basically so that your cake board doesn't slide around while you're frosting, because well, obviously that'll be just a disaster if that happens. Push it down gently. Now, obviously, don't use like a heavy duty tape. You want to be able to lift the cake board off when you're done. Next, you need to add parchment strips right along the outer edges of your cake board. This is so that when you apply the crumb coat, it's cleaner and your frosting doesn't get all over the place. Just make sure you remove the parchment strips after your crumb coat has hardened before you do your final decorations. Smear a dollop of buttercream onto the middle of your cake board and then place your first cake layer directly on top. Doing this will hold your cake in place. I lost some footage, so I'll start with my second layer. I took one of my cake layers here and then I added some buttercream, spread it all the way out to the outer edges if you can, and then go ahead and add your chunks of fruit. I use strawberries here, and then just repeat the process. I'm going to speed it up to kind of make it quicker. Now I'm using my Italian meringue buttercream for this recipe, and I'll post the link up above. Now next is the crumb coat. Very easy. Put a ton of frosting at the top, and then using an offset spatula, just spread it out all the way out to the outer edges again. And then just do the sides. Same thing. You want to use it back and forth, sweep.
And the function of the crumb coat, right? It's okay that you get crumbs in the crumb coat. So it's just a base, okay? Then you're going to finish on top of the crumb coat. So you won't do this for your cupcakes, but I want to show you sort of the broader functionality of preparing a cake.
Motion, and make sure to wipe off the excess buttercream as you go along as well. So to do the sides, you need to hold your spatula at a vertical angle and go left and right using that sweeping motion to get your buttercream nice and even. And again, make sure you always wipe off the excess buttercream to start fresh. It just makes a cleaner, more smoother crumb coat. So I slowed this back down to show you.
Into an all building hold. There is not an emergency. We need all students to return to your classroom. Teachers, please do not let students be removed from class.
Do not let students be removed from class.
Battleground High School, there is no emergency, but we are going into an all building hold. Please go to your classroom. Stay out of the hallways until you hear an announcement on the PA system. Thank you.
You guys how to clean this all up. Take the back of your offset spatula and work around the cake. Your turntable will do most of the work for you. So just keep turning the turntable and keeping your spatula still. And just keep going along until it's nice and smooth. Finally, you can smooth out the top. This is very easy. Start off at the outer edges. And all you gotta do is work your way towards the middle of the cake with one single sweep. And always wipe off the excess buttercream before you start each new sweep. Outside, work your way inside, wipe off the excess, and just repeat until it's nice and smooth. Place your cake in the fridge and allow the crumb coat to harden. Thanks for watching.
All right, just some tips and tricks.
Hi, guys.
Just to give you an overview, right? The key is this, with cake preparation, right? Just like anything else we do in here, always read your recipe. In this case, I'll give you time here in a few minutes to read through this recipe. You will note, I've distributed the recipe. There are 2 recipes this week, okay? So really we have a total of 3 days. You're going to go ahead and prepare mise en place, the first recipe, right? You're going to go ahead the second day. Tomorrow, we're going to bake that recipe, okay? And then on Thursday, when you return, because we have no class on Wednesday, you're going to go ahead and, since they're cooled, you'll decorate them and eat them on Thursday/Friday, okay? So in order to stay on schedule, we want to start mise en place today, which means I'm going to move this right along, okay? Your ovens need to be preheated. You don't need to preheat it today. Tomorrow, right when you come in, you need to know who Chef of the Week is, because we're going to jump to it here in about 5 minutes. And then tomorrow as well, we want to go right into lab when you get here tomorrow. You want to have room temp ingredients. So tomorrow, okay, today we'll measure, okay? And then I'll make sure that your ingredients are pulled out early enough that they're at room temperature when you start working with them. That's going to be important for your butter. A little bit different than some of our other preparations when it comes to cookies this semester. This butter, you want to have at room temperature. Okay, precision in measuring is super important. Okay, use the proper size pan and make sure the pan corresponds with the recipe, okay, that you're preparing. Okay, you want to prepare the pan properly, whether that means putting what's called adobe, a flour fat mixture into the pan, or cutting parchment to line the pan, or spraying oil into the pan. Any number of methodologies to make sure the pan is prepared properly. When you deal with aeration, all right, when you're whipping, like she mentioned at the beginning of the video, egg whites, make sure you whip them, but don't over whip them. You don't want them to look dry, okay? You want them to look moist, but look at me really quickly. You want that peak to stand up. It can go down a little bit, but you don't want it to be so dry that it just looks fragmented. You want it to look smooth and have that peak drop just a little bit. That's the stiff peak that you're looking for when we start working on our frosting. Don't open the oven during the baking process, right? Let it finish, especially for cake. That's important. Cookies, a little bit more latitude there. Check it for the proper degree of doneness. You can insert a paring knife into the middle of the cake or a toothpick or a skewer. And then just be patient. Let the cake cool. You never want to decorate a warm cake, okay? The reason why we're going to bake the cake tomorrow and then cool it and then frost it on Thursday, okay? And you'll make your frosting tomorrow. The reason why we do that is simply because we want to make sure the cake is completely cooled down so that the crumbs don't come off of the cake. All right, quick walkthrough of the red velvet cupcake preparation here. This is what we're doing this week, so watch the screen closest to you, and then we're going to wash our hands, stack our stools, and get going for mise en place. So here's the video.
Hey bakers, today we're making one of my favorite treats ever, red velvet cupcakes. They are so tender, fluffy, moist, and dreamy. Your eyes will just pop out of your head and like, what is this? This is so delicious. Maybe not, but they're really good. And they're topped with this cloud of cream cheese frosting that's perfectly tangy, just sweet, and so easy to make. Let's get started. I'm sifting all the dry ingredients, starting off with 1 2/3 cups or 213 grams of all-purpose flour into the bowl of my standing mixer. 213 grams of flour. There we go. Okay, that was easy. 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda and a full teaspoon of baking powder. 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt. And because this is a red velvet, there will be 2 teaspoons of cocoa powder. A red velvet cake is actually the cocoa powder you use reacting with the buttermilk. It creates this pink color. It's like very dusty chocolate pink. That's not the case anymore. Most people don't want to see that. Some people don't even want to put any cocoa powder in their cake, but for me, I feel like it needs it. Sift, 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 sift. And because this is a cake, let's not forget 1 full cup or 200 grams of sugar. I forget the sugar so often. Ugh. Okay, now let's whisk it together. I'm done with my scale. I'm gonna put this aside for a moment. Now for the wet ingredients, 3 whole eggs. 1, 2, and 3. Room temperature if you can, please. 3/4 of a cup of buttermilk. If you don't have buttermilk at home, that's fine. Use regular whole milk and add like a little bit less than a tablespoon of white vinegar or even lemon juice. Set it aside, let it curdle. It'll have a similar buttermilky taste and feel. The buttermilk has more acid in it and it will react with the sodium bicarbonate and make things a little puffier. Okay, let's whisk this together first just to get this going. A couple tablespoons of vanilla extract. And now for the red food coloring, I am in America. I will be using some super red Americolor food gel paste. Will 1 drop work? No. 2? No. 3. Let's see. There we go, a nice realistic looking red color. Perfect. So now back to the dry mixture and let's get to reverse creaming. So right now I have 3/4 of a cup or about 190 grams of unsalted butter at room temperature, and you want this to be yielding to the touch but not melty, if that makes sense. Just cut it into like kind of tablespoon sized dollops. You can actually just use your fingers and just distribute them in that fluffy, cloudy, chocolatey mixture. You don't want one giant clump of butter going into the mixer because that'll just take longer to break apart. Fingers are getting very moisturized. This definitely reminds me of making pastry, but the end result is so different. Now that our butter is in there, we're going to mix this on low, and you're gonna end up with like a crummy, crumbly mixture. On low, just let it mix. It'll work itself out. increase the speed to like medium-low after a few seconds. And the butter's getting all broken up right now, tinier and tinier pieces. You're gonna end up with like a sandy, like a wet sandy mixture almost. All that flour is getting coated with the fat from the butter. That's gonna prevent it from being really bready and tough. It's gonna keep it nice and tender. All right, let's take a look. I wanna show you what this is like. Look at this mixture. It smells so good. And you can see it's like wet sand almost. Back to our wet mixture, we're gonna add in about half of it, let it mix for 1.5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes, and it's gonna get nice and smooth. Don't add it all in at once because it's not going to mix up properly. Mix it on medium, walk away, take a phone call, do your nails, whatever. No one can do their nails in 1.5 minutes. That was wrong. Okay, let's take a look. This looks really great. It's fluffed up a lot. It's nice and airy. However, I don't know. Even with that food coloring in, I'm not sure it's going to be the right color, so we might have to add a little bit more. Just warning you ahead of time. Okay, now let's add in half of the half, or 1/4 of the wet mixture. So, another half, and then mix it up for like 30 seconds. On low. On low. Now to medium. All right, the rest of the mixture in. Don't be afraid to scrape that bowl down. I will be adding more food coloring in. Don't judge me. This is optional. All right, I am satisfied with that color, and let's get this into our cupcake papers right now. I'm using an ice cream scoop just to plop this batter into my prepared pan. Let's bake it at 350 for maybe 15 to 20 minutes. Keep an eye on it. Kind of depends on how hot your oven is. You could also switch this around halfway through so that you get a nice even bake and nothing is, a little bit burnt in the back. Keep an eye on it. While those cupcakes are in the oven, let's whip up a giant batch of cream cheese frosting. It's one of my favorite things to eat, and it is delicious. First off, we're gonna sift 1.5 pounds of confectioner sugar. You don't have to sift the sugar, but it's a good practice to have. So let's sift it out, and using a scale helps. You don't have to sift it all at once though. You can do it in batches. So sift, sift, sift. It's also good to get the lumps out ahead of time because if you're gonna try and mix and mix and mix, cheese-based frostings like mascarpone frosting and cream cheese frosting can theoretically be overwhipped. More for mascarpone frosting, which is delicious, but you don't wanna overwhip things. Cloudy with a chance of sugar. Now we're gonna set this sugar aside, come back to it in a few minutes, put your scale away too, and we're gonna cream our butter, 3 sticks, into the bowl of your stand mixer. This makes a big batch, so don't see all the butter and panic. So let's add that on there, cream it up. All right, so my butter is nice and creamy. Room temperature butter should yield to the touch. When you press down, it shouldn't be hard, but it shouldn't be melty either. It's in between. Nice pinch of salt. And we're gonna add in 16 ounces of cream cheese. If you don't have cream cheese, I question why you're watching this video, but you could also use Neufchâtel cheese, which is very similar, or you could use mascarpone as well. It's like a cross between cream cheese and heavy whipping cream. I would almost describe it as like cream made solid. I'm gonna cream this up now, mix it with that butter well. And I'm gonna add in a teaspoon of vanilla. Always a nice idea. And why do I put away an empty bottle of vanilla? Okay, this one's empty too. And I'm gonna open a giant new vanilla. This is Nielsen Massey. It's a very good brand. There are many good brands though, so if you're getting Rodell, that's nice too. Just go for the real stuff. 1 teaspoon of vanilla, please. There we go. Thank you. Cream it up. Let it get well combined. And let's whip that bowl down too. This tastes delicious already, and I'm not above eating it. Why is cream cheese so good? All right, that's all mixed up, and I'm just gonna add in like a cup or so of sugar at a time and let it incorporate. You know what? Okay. Once that's incorporated, add the rest, or another batch. Look at this. Let's just take a taste. You might notice though, it is very, it's runny. It's a runny mixture, so we have to add a little bit more sugar in to firm it up. And we're gonna mix it in. Okay, let's check this out. Fresh spoon, a little bit wider, and you can see it's holding a peak more, so this is much more pipeable. That extra sugar made a big difference. Oh my God. I might add in a little blessing of salt. Call that a day. That's delicious. My red velvet cupcakes are out of the oven and just cool enough to touch. They're still warm. I want to talk to you about the color. Look at this. This is a red velvet cupcake. If you want it to have, they smell really good. Oh my gosh. If you wanted to have more of a chocolatey flavor, just add in like a tablespoon of cocoa powder, or whatever you want. You could add in 1 tablespoon of cocoa powder, even 2 tablespoons of cocoa powder, and you can dial down the red for sure. This is one I made yesterday, and I used more cocoa powder and less red food coloring in it. Still looks, to me, this looks reddish, but I feel for the sake of photography, we're gonna go with the more food coloring one. You also want to have like 1 cupcake, and you can really load up on the red food coloring if you want for that 1 cupcake to stir it directly into the cupcake batter. We're gonna use a cheese grater and grate this out so that we have nice crumbs to sprinkle around. Those crumbs will give us like a little bit of extra fun visual cues saying, hey, this is a red velvet cupcake. Eat me, I'm delicious. Anyways, we have some crumbs. We're gonna use these at the very end. Setting them aside. I baked these cupcakes in plain old white cupcake wrappers. They're actually my favorite. Don't tell anybody. I like that you can see the color through. But I think they'll look extra cute in decorative cupcake papers like these. You can bake your cupcakes in these papers, but they become a little bit discolored, not necessarily from the butter because they're lined with like some wax stuff, but from the baking. It heats them up and makes them a bit yellow. So my solution is just to pop them right in. There we go. I have my buttercream cream cheese frosting in a piping bag fitted with an 869 tip, an open star, my favorite tip in the world. And we're just gonna give it a nice swoopy dollop. So apply pressure,
Thursday.
Squeeze, turn, and lift gently. Top. There we go. Whoa. That's what I call a spire. So we have a beautiful cupcake over here. All we need now are some crumbs to sprinkle it on top. What cupcake could this be, I wonder? A red velvet cupcake, that's what. This is so simple to make. I've been snacking, as you saw, and it is delicious, but I will take a formal bite in just a moment. Let's make a few more.
Okay, what I'd like you to do now, let's go ahead and wash our hands, stack our stools, grab our recipes. You're focused on the mise en place today. Your day 1 of lab, mise en place lab direction. Let's rock and roll.